At the beginning of the 20th century, Toronto was a very different place, but it aspired to be something far greater. Today we're talking about one of the ways that it achieved that, the history of the Royal Ontario Museum. In the early 1900s, the city was grimy, small, and without even the maple leaves. A small group of men would set out to change this, though. Their efforts would lead to the creation of one of Canada's most prized institutions, the Royal Ontario Museum, or the ROM.
The ROM was established with the ROM Act in the Ontario Legislature on April 16, 1912. The first structure would open on the present-day western side of the property along Philosopher's Walk on March 19, 1914, funded by both the University of Toronto and the provincial government. This relationship between the school and the government would end up long-standing. The ROM was envisioned as opening in stages. Its original location was along the west side, with an entrance facing Bloor. It was built by the prolific firm Darling & Pearson, who also designed the North Toronto Railway Station, the Canadian Bank of Commerce buildings, and dozens of others. In 1933, the East Wing was constructed, designed by the Chapman and Oxley firm. It was done in a Beaux Arts style, with an entrance onto Queen's Park. This completed the H shape that to some extent you still see today, underneath that is. By the 1950s, further expansion would take place, adding both research resources, storage, and display.
The 1960s would lead to another important phase, the opening of the McLaughlin Planetarium, which would sadly shutter in 1995 after Mike Harris cutbacks, despite still turning a profit. Now let me briefly digress. If you're interested in learning more about Toronto history, please make sure to subscribe to this channel, like it, share it, and as I always say, tell all your friends. In the late 1970s and early 80s, $55 million was put towards renovations of the museum, a much-needed expansion of research facilities, storage, and display. The ROM was growing.
The building would be closed during construction from January of 1980 to September of 1982, segueing into the opening of the Queen Elizabeth Terrace building along Bloor Street, designed by Jean Kinoshita in 1984. Many of you will remember this view. Perhaps you'll even remember the north side of the street, lined with cool old fast food joints for years, aka that interesting McDonald's. Here are some photos of the museum throughout the 1970s and 1980s. In 2001, they launched the Renaissance ROM project, an effort to revitalize and modernize the museum, to rebrand it as exciting and cosmopolitan. In 2002, they received $60 million in funding from the federal and provincial governments, as well as millions from private donors, the largest of which being a $30 million donation from Michael Lee Chin, namesake of the Michael Lee Chin crystal. This would sadly necessitate the tearing down of the terraces, and on June 2, 2007, the official reopening would occur.
The Michael Lee Chin crystal would be viewed as controversial to some. At minimum, though, everyone would take note. The north side along Bloor would be designed by Polish-American architect Daniel Libeskind, who, if you look at the Denver Art Museum, had a very distinct style.
The power of the glass and aluminum starkly contrasts the former stately appearance of the museum. Some people love it, others grew to appreciate it. But when it opened, it received significant pushback. As the influential architecture critic for the Washington Post, Philip Kennicott, put it, the addition surpasses the ugliness of bland functional buildings by being both bland and useless. Former Toronto historian Doug Taylor wrote of his time as a child at the ROM in the 1940s that it was awe-inspiring to stare up at the towering dinosaurs, mounted animals, giant totem poles. But many of those same exhibits and artifacts still are there today. In fact, if you or your parents or even grandparents went there, depending on where in the museum, you would be having a very similar experience. But what was and is within the walls is sometimes problematic. Some of the origins of these artifacts are questionable. Museums around the world are grappling with what to do with these historical pieces that clearly were obtained in non-consensual ways.
Should some be given back? Leave your answers in the comment section below.
But the ROM has dealt with controversy before. In 1989, the museum faced fierce pushback for an exhibit called the Into the Heart of Africa, something that the ROM in 2016 addressed further. The exhibition displayed images and words that showed the fundamentally racist ideas and attitudes of early collectors, and in doing so, unintentionally reproduced a colonial, racist, and Eurocentric premises.
Many of us have found ourselves roaming the large and stoic building throughout our lives, and any given year over 1 million others do so too. Apart from the C&E, Toronto has very few straight lines through so many generations. So whether you agree with the concept, whether you like the design, or whether you're scared of woolly mammoths, we all can agree that it's a great thing to have such an internationally respected institution in our city. The goal was to put Toronto on the map, and it did.